How has your day been so far? Hello, we're AETA Stories, and today we're sharing a brand new original story with you.
Amelia Carter climbed the staircase to her bedroom, one careful step at a time, her hand sliding along the cool wooden railing as if it were the only solid thing keeping her upright. Her legs felt heavy, strangely unreliable, as though they belonged to someone else. By the time she reached the landing, her breath was shallow, her pulse loud in her ears. She paused, waiting for the dizziness to pass, counting silently the way she always did. 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, until the spinning eased enough for her to move again. She told herself it was nothing. Everyone felt like this at the end of senior year. Long nights, early mornings, endless mock exams, practice tests, private tutoring sessions, stacked one after another. Portland's gray spring light pressed against the windows, dull and constant, and Amelia blamed the weather, the workload, the pressure she had willingly placed on herself. She was aiming high. She had to. Amelia was the kind of student teachers spoke about with quiet admiration. Top of her class, disciplined, focused, the one who never missed an assignment and never asked for extensions. Medical school had been her goal for as long as she could remember, not because anyone forced it on her, but because it made sense. Bodies followed rules. Symptoms had causes. If something was wrong, it could be identified, treated, fixed. Logic was comforting that way. Her father, Michael Carter, supported her ambition without hesitation. He always did, at least financially. He owned several high-end restaurants across the city, the kind that required his presence from morning until late at night. He worked constantly, traveled often, and spoke in short, efficient sentences when he was home. Still, he had promised Amelia that once she turned 18, he would help her buy an apartment near campus, a clean slate, independence, no distractions. Amelia clung to that promise during the worst days, the days when her head felt thick and heavy, when climbing the stairs felt like scaling a hill with weights strapped to her ankles. She pictured a quiet apartment, white walls, a desk by the window, a place where she could breathe. Her mother would have liked that idea. Amelia barely remembered her, only fragments remained. A soft voice, the warmth of arms around her. A photograph on the shelf in her room showed a smiling woman with gentle eyes, dark hair pulled back loosely, as if she had been interrupted mid-laugh. Her mother had died when Amelia was very young, taken by a congenital heart condition that no treatment could correct. Sometimes Amelia tried to imagine what her life would have been like if she had grown up with her, but the images never stayed long. They slipped away, leaving behind a familiar, hollow ache. That ache was something Amelia had learned to live with. What unsettled her now were the things she could not explain. It started subtly, a sound that might have been the house settling, a whisper so faint she could never catch a word, only the impression of speech brushing the edge of her awareness. Once, late at night, she had lifted her head from her textbook, certain someone had called her name. The hallway outside her door had been empty, silent, the air unmoving. She told herself she had imagined it. Stress could do strange things to the mind. Every medical forum, every psychology article said the same thing. Sleep deprivation, anxiety, overstimulation, perfectly normal under pressure. Still, there were moments when Amelia felt watched. Not in a dramatic way, not like fear in a movie scene, but something quieter, more insidious. A prickle along her spine when she crossed the living room, a tightening in her chest when she reached for a glass in the kitchen. She never turned around fast enough to catch anything out of place. Everything always looked exactly as it should. Logic, she reminded herself. Panic solved nothing. When the whispers came, soft, indistinct, barely there, Amelia pressed her lips together and focused on what she could control. Facts, numbers, deadlines. She studied harder, slept less, drank more coffee. If her body protested, she ignored it. If her mind drifted, she pulled it back by force. She did not tell her father. She did not tell anyone. There was no point in alarming people over sensations she could not prove. Amelia knew what happened to young women who admitted to uncertainty, to weakness. They were watched more closely, questioned, redirected for their own good. And Amelia could not afford that. Not now. Not when her future was so close she could almost reach it. Whatever this was, she decided it would pass. She would make sure of it. When Amelia thought of safety, her mind did not go to the large house in Portland or to the quiet efficiency of her father's world. It drifted instead to the coast, to the narrow road that curved toward the ocean, to the low wooden house where her maternal grandparents lived, and to the steady, unhurried rhythm of waves breaking somewhere beyond the trees. Every summer of her childhood had followed the same pattern. As soon as school ended, Amelia was sent away from the city and its polished surfaces to the small coastal town near Newport, where time moved differently. Mornings began with the smell of salt and coffee. Afternoons stretched long and warm. Evenings were filled with stories told at the kitchen table. Questions asked and answered without hurry. There, she was not a responsibility to manage or a schedule to maintain. She was simply loved. Her grandmother listened carefully to everything Amelia said, no matter how trivial it seemed. Her grandfather taught her small, patient skills, how to sand a piece of driftwood smooth, how to fix a loose hinge, how to wait. And her Uncle Stephen, who lived with them, was a constant presence of uncomplicated joy. Though he was an adult, he moved through the world with a child's openness, finding wonder in ordinary things. He laughed easily, swam recklessly in the cold water, and treated Amelia as an equal in games that sprawled across the living room floor. Only later did Amelia understand the quiet worry behind her grandparents' kindness, the unspoken question of what would happen to Stephen when they were gone. As a child, she had only known that with them, she felt whole. The contrast with Portland had always been stark. After her mother's death, the city house became a place of silence and order. Michael Carter did his best, but grief pushed him deeper into work, and work demanded everything. He provided generously, ensured Amelia lacked nothing materially, but he was rarely present in ways that could not be measured. Meals were often eaten alone. Conversations were brief, efficient, focused on school performance and logistics. Amelia learned early not to ask for more than he could give. Vanessa entered their lives, quietly at first. Amelia was 6 when her father brought a young woman home one evening and introduced her as a friend. Vanessa was beautiful in a polished, effortless way, with warm eyes and an easy smile. She knelt to Amelia's level when she spoke, remembered her favorite colors, and always arrived with something small but thoughtful in her hands. Vanessa braided Amelia's hair, played board games with her, baked pastries that filled the kitchen with sweetness and laughter. For the first time since her mother's death, the house felt softer, warmer, less hollow. Amelia wanted badly to believe this was what a family was supposed to feel like. So when her father announced that he and Vanessa were getting married, Amelia did not hesitate to feel happy. She imagined a future where someone waited for her after school, asked about her day, noticed when she was tired. She imagined having a mother again, not the one she had lost, but something close enough to ease the ache. The wedding was small, elegant, efficient, much like Michael himself. Vanessa moved into the house seamlessly, reorganizing spaces, bringing new routines with her. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Amelia tried to be helpful, polite, accommodating. She wanted this to work. The birth of the twins came a few years later. Ethan and Oliver arrived healthy and loud, filling the house with noise and attention. Michael's joy was immediate and visible, a lightness Amelia had rarely seen in him before. Vanessa was radiant in her role, attentive and devoted, hovering constantly over her sons. That was when the shift began. At first, it was subtle. Vanessa grew distracted when Amelia spoke. irritated by small things: shoes left by the door, laughter that carried down the hallway during nap time. Complaints were framed as concerns, corrections as guidance. Amelia was told to be quieter, more considerate, less demanding. Then the warmth disappeared entirely. Vanessa stopped asking about Amelia's day, stopped sitting with her at the table. Her tone hardened, her patience thinned. Amelia's presence became something to manage rather than welcome, a complication, an inconvenience. Michael noticed little. When tensions surfaced, he smoothed them over with explanations. Vanessa was tired. Motherhood was demanding. Adjustments took time. Amelia listened, nodded, tried harder. She told herself it was temporary, that if she stayed out of the way, if she succeeded quietly, if she asked for nothing, things would improve. But the house never warmed again. And slowly, without any single moment to mark the change, Amelia stopped feeling like a child at all. The whispers did not fade the way Amelia expected them to. Instead, they grew clearer, more deliberate, as if whatever had once lingered at the edges of her awareness was slowly learning how to speak. At first, the voices came only when the house was quiet. Late at night, when the lights were off and the city outside had settled into its low, distant hum, Amelia would pause over her textbook, pen suspended in midair, certain she had heard someone murmuring just beyond her door. The sounds were never loud. They did not shout or command. They hovered, indistinct, fragmented, impossible to pin down. By the time she stood and opened the door, the hallway was always empty. Soon it was no longer just sound. Amelia began noticing movement where nothing should have been. A dark shape slipping across the edge of her vision. A shadow where no object stood. When she turned her head directly toward it, the shape dissolved, leaving behind only the unsettling awareness that something had been there a moment before. She tested herself constantly, blinking hard, rubbing her eyes, checking the light. Everything else looked normal. The furniture remained where it belonged. The walls did not shift. The house did not change. That was what frightened her most. Amelia understood enough about the mind to recognize danger when she saw it. Hallucinations were not something to dismiss lightly. Yet, she also knew that stress, exhaustion, and anxiety could distort perception. She was under immense pressure. Anyone would be. That explanation was rational, measured, acceptable. Still, she could not ignore the quiet alarm sounding somewhere inside her. Something was wrong. She did not lose time. She did not forget where she was. She did not confuse imagination with reality. The voices, the shadows, she knew they were not real, even as she experienced them. That awareness became her anchor. As long as she could identify the symptoms, name them, analyze them, she believed she remained in control. Vanessa, however, was watching. It started with glances, brief, assessing looks when Amelia entered a room. Vanessa began asking small questions, casual on the surface. Had Amelia eaten? Did she remember to turn off the stove? Had she locked the door? The questions carried no obvious accusation, but they lingered uncomfortably, as if each answer were being weighed. When Amelia forgot something trivial, a glass left on the counter, a light still on in the bathroom, Vanessa noticed. She made a point of correcting it, sometimes loudly, sometimes with a sigh heavy enough to fill the room. Amelia sensed the shift in attention, the way her movements were tracked, catalogued. She tried to be more careful, more precise. She double-checked everything she touched, every task she completed. The effort left her exhausted, her head aching by evening, but she did not complain. Michael remained distant, as always, but the tone of his questions began to change. Vanessa spoke to him privately. Amelia never heard the full conversations. Only fragments carried down the hallway or overheard through partially closed doors. Words surfaced again and again, wrapped in concern. Withdrawn, strange, forgetful. Vanessa never sounded alarmist. She framed everything as worry, as a mother's instinct to protect her family. "She's not herself lately," Vanessa said once, her voice calm but firm. "I'm just saying we should pay attention." Michael listened. Amelia could see it in the way his gaze lingered on her now. No longer neutral, but searching. He began asking questions of his own. Was she sleeping enough? Eating properly? Why did she look so pale? Why did she seem distracted? Amelia answered honestly, carefully. She mentioned stress, exams, preparation. She avoided anything that might sound uncertain, anything that could be interpreted as weakness. She knew how easily narratives formed, how quickly concern could turn into something else. It was Michael who insisted on seeing a doctor. He presented the idea as a precaution, nothing more, a discreet consultation, anonymous if necessary, just to rule things out. His tone was practical, reassuring. But Amelia felt the floor tilt beneath her feet as he spoke. She nodded, forcing herself to appear calm, but inside panic flared. Medical scrutiny was not neutral. Records followed people. Diagnoses lingered. She knew what even a suggestion of mental instability could mean for her future. Medical school required disclosures. Licenses required evaluations. One label, one note in the wrong place, and everything she had worked toward could vanish. That fear lodged itself deep in her chest. Amelia did not protest. She did not argue. She told herself that cooperating was safer than resisting, that transparency would protect her. But as she lay awake that night, listening to the house breathe around her, the whispers returning in faint, mocking fragments, she wondered when concern had quietly transformed into suspicion, and how far it would go. Lucas Miller had been part of Amelia's life for so long that she sometimes forgot there had ever been a time without him. They had met in elementary school, bonded first by proximity and later by habit, until his presence became something steady and unquestioned. Lucas was the kind of person who noticed details others overlooked. When someone was quieter than usual, when a smile didn't quite reach the eyes, he never demanded explanations. He waited. That was why Amelia trusted him. They met after school near the older wing of the building, where the stairwell leading up to the unused attic level offered a narrow windowsill that overlooked the city. It had become their place over the years, a quiet corner no one else cared about, a space that felt temporarily removed from the rest of the world. The late afternoon light slanted through the dusty glass, turning the air pale and still. Lucas noticed immediately that something was wrong. Amelia's movements were slower than usual, her shoulders drawn tight, her expression distant. He didn't comment right away. He simply sat beside her, close enough to be present, but not intrusive. When she finally spoke, the words came out quietly, as if she were afraid they might echo too loudly. She told him everything, about the whispers that surfaced when the house was silent, about the shadows that slipped into her peripheral vision and vanished when she turned, about the fear she carried, not of the experiences themselves, but of what they might mean. She admitted that she knew these things were not real, that she was aware enough to recognize them as symptoms, and that knowledge was the only thing keeping her grounded. Lucas listened without interrupting. He did not recoil. He did not question her sanity or try to reassure her with empty phrases. His expression shifted from casual attentiveness to something more focused, more serious, but his voice remained even when he finally spoke. "You're not imagining that something's wrong," he said calmly, "and you're not losing yourself either. The fact that you can describe this so clearly matters." Amelia exhaled, the breath she hadn't realized she was holding leaving her all at once. She had braced herself for disbelief, for panic, for the kind of overreaction that turned concern into catastrophe. Instead, Lucas treated her confession like a problem to be approached, not a crisis to be feared. He asked measured questions. When had it started? How often did it happen? Did anything make it better or worse? Amelia answered honestly, surprised by how much easier it was to speak once she had begun. The weight she had been carrying alone for months felt lighter, as if simply naming it had reduced its power. When she finished, Lucas was quiet for a moment. "You should tell your dad," he said finally. "Not because you're in danger right now, but because you shouldn't have to handle this alone. And because getting help early is better than waiting until someone else decides for you." The thought made Amelia tense. She stared out the window, watching cars move slowly along the street below. Telling her father meant exposing herself to scrutiny, to judgment, to decisions she might not control. Yet hearing the suggestion framed this way, practical, protective, shifted something inside her. "I'm scared," she admitted, "of what it could cost me." "I know," Lucas said, "but hiding it could cost you more." He didn't promise that everything would be fine. He didn't offer guarantees. What he offered instead was presence. He took her hands briefly in his, grounding, steady. "Whatever happens," he said, "you won't be dealing with it alone. I'm here." That was when Amelia felt it, a small but unmistakable easing in her chest. The constant tension, the vigilance she maintained every waking moment, loosened its grip just enough for her to breathe freely. For the first time in months, she did not feel isolated inside her own mind. Their bond shifted that day, though neither of them named it. It wasn't romance. Not yet. It was something quieter and deeper. Trust built not on declarations but on understanding. As they sat together in the fading light, Amelia realized that even if the path ahead was uncertain, she was no longer walking it by herself. Amelia chose her moment carefully. She waited until late evening, when the house had quieted and her father's phone lay untouched on the kitchen counter. Michael Carter listened without interrupting as she spoke, his expression unreadable, his posture rigid with the discipline he carried into every conversation. She told him about the whispers, the shadows, the dizziness that came without warning. She was precise, measured, deliberate in her wording. She emphasized what she knew as much as what she experienced, that she understood these things were not real, that she remained aware, grounded, rational. Michael nodded slowly. He asked questions. How long had this been happening? How often? Had she told anyone else? Amelia answered honestly. When she finished, silence settled between them, heavy and clinical. "I'm glad you told me," he said at last. "We'll handle this responsibly." He arranged the consultation himself. Private, discreet, anonymous as he promised. No hospital records tied to her school. No unnecessary exposure. The appointment took place in a quiet office downtown, far from the noise of emergency rooms and crowded clinics. The psychiatrist spoke in calm, professional tones, asking Amelia to describe her symptoms while making careful notes. He nodded often, his questions precise, his conclusions cautious. Stress, he suggested. Severe academic pressure. Possible anxiety-related perceptual disturbances. He recommended medication, not as a diagnosis. He explained, but as a way to stabilize her symptoms while they observed. Amelia hesitated. She asked about side effects, about long-term implications. The psychiatrist reassured her that the dosage was low, the prescription temporary. Michael approved the plan without hesitation. At first, Amelia told herself she felt no difference. She took the pills exactly as directed, recorded how she felt in a small notebook, monitored her reactions with the same discipline she applied to studying. Within days, however, her body began to protest. The nausea came first, sharp and unpredictable. She struggled to eat, forcing down small meals she barely tasted. Then came the fatigue, a deep, bone-heavy exhaustion that sleep did not relieve. Getting out of bed felt like pushing against a current that pulled her back under. Concentration became difficult. Words blurred on the page. Her thoughts moved more slowly, as if wading through thick water. The whispers did not disappear. The shadows did not vanish. If anything, Amelia felt less equipped to fight them. The medication dulled her edges without sharpening her clarity, leaving her trapped in a fog she had not asked for. Vanessa noticed immediately. She commented on Amelia's pallor, her slowed movements, her quiet. Her concern was carefully calibrated, never loud, never dramatic. She asked Michael if he had seen how unsteady Amelia looked lately, how often she forgot things, how she sometimes seemed distant even during conversations. She framed everything as worry, as vigilance. "She didn't used to be like this," Vanessa said one evening, her voice low, almost tender. "I'm just afraid she's getting worse." Michael watched Amelia more closely after that. His gaze followed her through rooms, lingered when she paused too long on the stairs, tightened when she pushed food around her plate without eating. He began asking her to rest more, to step back from studying, to let things wait. His concern, once rooted in trust, shifted subtly toward fear. Amelia felt it immediately. She tried to explain that the medication made her tired, that the side effects were temporary, that she could manage. Michael listened, but doubt had already begun to settle. He asked whether she was sure she was taking the pills correctly, whether she remembered conversations from earlier in the day, whether she felt confused. Vanessa remained just behind him, quiet and observant, her presence a constant reminder that Amelia was no longer the sole narrator of her own experience. Each morning, Amelia woke heavier than the last. Each evening, she forced herself through assignments she completed more slowly than before, terrified that falling behind would confirm everything being said about her. She stopped complaining altogether, afraid that any admission of discomfort would be used as proof. What frightened her most was not the symptoms themselves, but the way the ground beneath her was shifting. She could feel the balance of power changing, the narrative slipping from her hands. The more she complied, the less she seemed to be believed. And for the first time since the whispers had begun, Amelia wondered whether seeking help, meant to protect her future, was quietly placing it at risk instead. The invitation came quietly, slipped into conversation as if it were nothing more than a casual suggestion. Lucas mentioned it one afternoon after school, his tone deliberately light. A short trip, just a few days, a small group of friends heading east, away from the city, into the gorge where the air was cooler and the noise of Portland thinned into distance. Amelia's first instinct was hesitation, the idea of leaving home, of stepping outside the carefully monitored routine that had formed around her, felt risky. Yet something in her tightened at the thought of staying. The walls of the house seemed closer lately, the silence heavier. She told Lucas she would think about it. Vanessa's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. "No," she said flatly when Amelia brought it up at dinner. "Absolutely not. This is not the time for trips. You're not well." The words landed with a sharp finality that made Amelia flinch. Vanessa leaned forward slightly, her expression composed but firm, listing concerns in a measured tone. Amelia needed rest, stability, supervision. Wandering off into the woods with friends was irresponsible, dangerous. Michael listened. His fork paused midair. For a moment, Amelia thought he would agree. He had been cautious lately, careful, visibly uneasy whenever she left the house alone. But this time, he hesitated. "It's only a few days," he said slowly, "and she won't be alone." Vanessa turned toward him, surprised. She repeated her concerns, emphasizing Amelia's condition, the medication, the unpredictability. Michael considered this, then shook his head. "Staying cooped up here isn't helping," he said. "Fresh air might do her good." Amelia said nothing. She kept her eyes on her plate, afraid that any sign of eagerness would be interpreted as recklessness. When Michael finally nodded, granting permission with a few practical conditions, relief washed through her so suddenly it left her light-headed. They left early the next morning. As the city receded behind them, replaced by winding roads and dense stretches of green, Amelia felt something inside her begin to loosen. The air changed as they drove deeper into the gorge. Cooler, cleaner, carrying the scent of water and earth. When she stepped out of the car at their campsite, the first thing she noticed was the quiet, not the oppressive silence of the house, but a living stillness filled with wind, distant birds, the low rush of the river nearby. The whispers did not follow her. She waited for them, tense at first, bracing for the familiar intrusion. It never came. No murmurs brushed her thoughts. No voices threaded through the quiet. When she glanced sideways, expecting shadows to flicker at the edge of her vision, there was nothing, only sunlight filtering through leaves, solid and unambiguous. The clarity startled her. By the second day, Amelia felt different in ways she had almost forgotten were possible. She woke without nausea. Her limbs felt lighter. She moved easily, hiking short trails, sitting by the water, listening to conversation without strain. She laughed once, genuinely, the sound surprising even herself. Lucas watched her carefully but said nothing. He did not point out the change. He allowed it to exist without commentary, as if afraid that naming it might break whatever fragile balance had settled over her. 3 days passed this way. 3 full days without whispers, without shadows, without the sense of being observed. Amelia slept deeply, dreamlessly. Her thoughts moved at their usual pace again, sharp and ordered. She felt present in her body, aware of each step, each breath, grounded in the physical reality around her. By the 3rd evening, sitting near the fire as the light faded from the sky, Amelia reached a tentative conclusion. The treatment must finally be working. The idea filled her with cautious hope. Perhaps the medication needed time. Perhaps removing herself from stress had allowed it to take effect. The explanation was logical, reassuring, something she could accept without fear. She did not question why relief had come only after leaving home. She was not ready to examine that thought. When they returned to Portland, Amelia stepped back into the city with a quiet optimism she had not felt in months. She believed, for the first time since everything began, that she might be on her way back to herself. She did not know yet how fragile that belief was, or how quickly it would be tested. The return to Portland shattered Amelia's fragile optimism faster than she could understand it. The first night back, the whispers returned, soft at first, almost hesitant, as if testing whether they were welcome. By morning, the shadows followed. The clarity she had felt in the gorge dissolved, replaced by the familiar heaviness pressing against her temples and chest. Amelia told herself it was temporary. Transitions were difficult. Routine would stabilize her again. She repeated that thought as she moved through the house, unpacking her bag, folding clothes, trying to settle back into the careful order that now defined her life. It was late afternoon when she heard raised voices. They drifted from her father's study, muffled but unmistakably tense. Amelia slowed at the top of the stairs, not intending to listen, only to understand whether she was being called. But her name surfaced, sharp enough to stop her in place. "I'm telling you, Michael, this is becoming dangerous." Vanessa's voice was calm, controlled, but edged with urgency. Amelia felt her stomach tighten. "She's unstable," Vanessa continued. "You've seen it yourself. The confusion, the mood swings, and the boys, Ethan and Oliver, they're too young to understand what's happening. They shouldn't have to live with this." Michael said something in response, but his words were quieter, harder to make out. Amelia took a step closer, her pulse quickening. "She forgets things," Vanessa went on. "She zones out. What if she leaves the stove on? What if she scares them? I'm not saying she's a bad person, but she's not safe right now." Amelia's breath caught. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the careful, concerned tone with the cruelty of what was being said. She pressed her hand lightly against the wall, grounding herself as the room seemed to tilt. "There are facilities," Vanessa said, her voice lowering. Private ones. Discreet. Residential treatment centers that specialize in cases like this. They can help her in ways we can't. Amelia understood immediately what that meant. A facility meant separation, supervision, records, an official diagnosis that would follow her for the rest of her life. She pictured locked doors, monitored schedules, decisions made on her behalf. The thought tightened around her chest until breathing became difficult. Michael spoke again, louder this time. She's still my daughter. This isn't something you decide lightly. I know, Vanessa replied softly. That's why I've been patient. That's why I've waited. But this isn't about convenience. It's about protecting everyone involved, including Amelia. The word including rang hollow. Vanessa continued, outlining the plan with methodical precision. Long-term placement, structured care, evaluations conducted by professionals. On paper, it would be presented as voluntary, temporary, necessary, the kind of solution that appeared responsible, even compassionate to anyone looking from the outside. Amelia's thought spun. Medical school would be impossible. Any formal psychiatric diagnosis, any documented residential treatment, would raise questions she could never fully erase. Applications would be scrutinized, licenses delayed or denied. Her autonomy, her right to make decisions for herself, could be challenged. Once placed, leaving would not be simple. She imagined her future narrowing, doors closing one by one, not because she had failed, but because she had been labeled. Michael's silence stretched on. Amelia could picture him standing behind his desk, jaw clenched, weighing risks the way he always did. She knew his patterns well enough to recognize the pause. Not refusal, but calculation. I don't want to do this to her, he said finally, his voice strained. She's trying. She's cooperating. Vanessa did not raise her voice. She did not press aggressively. She sighed instead, a sound heavy with reluctant resolve. And if something happens, she asked, if she hurts herself or one of the boys, you'll never forgive yourself. Neither will I. Amelia's vision blurred. The argument was no longer about her well-being. It was about fear. Fear carefully cultivated and weaponized. She realized, with a sudden clarity, more terrifying than any hallucination, that the narrative had shifted beyond her control. Michael exhaled slowly. Let me think, he said. That was all Vanessa needed. Amelia stepped back from the door, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it would give her away. Her hands trembled as she retreated down the hallway, each step feeling unreal, disconnected. She reached her room and closed the door silently behind her, pressing her back against it as if it could shield her from what she had just heard. She understood now. This was not about treatment. It was about containment. And unless she acted, her future would be decided without her, quietly, efficiently, and permanently. That night, Amelia did not sleep. She lay on her bed staring at the ceiling. The house unusually quiet, every sound magnified by fear. Vanessa's words replayed in her mind with merciless clarity. Long-term, facility, safety. Amelia knew enough to understand what those phrases meant once they were translated into reality. They were not talking about counseling sessions or temporary observation. They were talking about containment. As dawn crept through the curtains, Amelia opened her laptop. She searched for the name Vanessa had mentioned. The website loaded slowly. Its polished photographs carefully chosen. Green lawns, bright common rooms, smiling patients in yoga classes. Everything looked serene, reassuring, too reassuring. She clicked deeper. Fine print replaced marketing language. Residential commitment. Continuous supervision. Limited external contact. Discharge determined by staff evaluations. Not patient request. Medical records permanently documented. Amelia's hands grew cold. This was not help. It was a place people were sent when their autonomy was no longer trusted. Once admitted, She might not be allowed to leave for months, possibly years. The idea that this could happen just weeks before her 18th birthday made her stomach twist. She would lose her chance to start medical school, lose control over her future before it even began. Her chest tightened as a familiar whisper brushed the edges of her hearing. She closed the laptop and pressed her palms to her temples, forcing herself to breathe. The fear was feeding it. She knew that now. Panic always made everything worse. She didn't hesitate again. Amelia grabbed her phone and called Lucas. He answered immediately, his voice alert despite the early hour. Amelia didn't waste time trying to soften the truth. She told him everything, what she had overheard, what she had found online, what she believed would happen next. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. "Then you can't stay there," Lucas said simply. "Not even another day." "I know," Amelia whispered, "but I don't know where to go." "I do," he replied. "My grandmother's apartment. She's at her summer place until fall. It's empty, safe. You can stay there as long as you need." The word safe settled something inside her. They moved quickly. Amelia packed only essentials, documents, clothes. Her laptop. She left a letter for her father, explaining that she needed time and space, that she was not running away, but protecting herself. She avoided accusations. She wasn't ready for that yet. When Lucas's car pulled up, Amelia slipped out quietly, her heart racing until the house disappeared behind them. The city blurred past the windows, but with every mile, the pressure in her chest eased. By the time they reached the apartment, a modest, sunlit place filled with old photographs and potted plants, Amelia realized something strange. The whispers were gone. Hours passed, then an entire day. No voices, no shadows, no dizziness. Her head felt clear in a way it hadn't for months. She waited for the symptoms to return, half expecting them to surge back once the adrenaline faded. They didn't. That night, Amelia slept deeply, dreamlessly. When she woke, she felt rested, truly rested, for the first time in what felt like a year. By the third day, the pattern was impossible to ignore. She felt normal, not numb, not detached, normal. Her appetite returned. Her thoughts were sharp. She laughed at something Lucas said and realized, with quiet astonishment, that the sound did not feel forced. Sitting at the small kitchen table, Amelia stared at her hands. Steady and calm. "This only happens at home," she said slowly. Lucas looked up from his coffee. "What does?" "The symptoms," she replied. "They disappear everywhere else. On the trip. Here. Every time I'm away. I'm fine." The words hung between them. Lucas didn't rush to fill the silence. He leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful rather than alarmed. "Amelia," he said carefully, "have you considered that something at your house might be causing it?" She frowned. "Like stress?" "Or something physical," he said. "Something you're exposed to regularly." The idea settled into place with unsettling ease. Food, drinks, medication. Her mind replayed months of meals eaten at home. The way Vanessa insisted on handling certain things personally. The way symptoms worsened gradually, predictably, only in that environment. Amelia's pulse quickened, not with fear this time, but with a growing, icy clarity. "You think I'm being poisoned," she said. Lucas didn't flinch. "I think it's a possibility we can't ignore." The word felt unreal, almost absurd, and yet nothing else explained the pattern. For the first time since this began, Amelia felt something she hadn't dared to feel before. Hope. Not the fragile hope that things might simply pass, but the sharper kind, the kind that came from understanding. From realizing that what had been happening to her might not be madness at all, but something deliberate, something that could be proven. And if it could be proven, then she was not powerless. She was running out of time, but she was no longer blind. The waiting was the hardest part. Amelia checked the email account multiple times a day, her heart stuttering every time a new notification appeared. The samples had been sent to an independent toxicology lab through one of her grandfather's old contacts. Discreet, expensive, and thorough. No insurance. No shortcuts. If something had been put into her body repeatedly, the lab would find traces, even if the substances were designed to fade quickly. The days passed quietly by the ocean. Amelia felt stronger with each sunrise. No whispers, no shadows, no dizziness. The contrast between her current clarity and the months she had spent deteriorating in her father's house was no longer subtle. It was undeniable. Then, one afternoon, the email arrived. Lucas was in the kitchen when Amelia opened it. She didn't speak at first. She simply stared at the screen, reading the report line by line. Then again, slower this time, as if afraid the words might rearrange themselves. They didn't. The results were clear. Her biological samples contained residues of synthetic compounds known to induce auditory and visual hallucinations when administered in small, repeated doses. Substances that, in controlled settings, were used in limited medical research, but which, outside of that context, amounted to deliberate poisoning. Long-term exposure explained everything. The fatigue, the nausea, the cognitive fog, the progressive loss of stability. Amelia exhaled shakily. She wasn't sick. She had never been sick. Lucas read the report over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. "This is it," he said quietly. "This explains everything." The relief that surged through Amelia was immediate and overwhelming. It felt almost painful, like blood returning to a limb that had gone numb. Tears blurred her vision, but this time they were not born of fear or confusion. They came from vindication. Her sanity had been stolen, and now it had been returned. They didn't go to the police. Not yet. Lucas insisted on one thing first. "Your father needs to see this," he said, "from someone he trusts." Michael Carter had been unraveling for weeks. The disappearance of his daughter, the silence that followed, the growing unease that something had gone terribly wrong, it all weighed heavily on him. He barely slept. He replayed his last conversations with Amelia over and over, searching for signs he might have missed. Vanessa's certainty no longer comforted him. If anything, it felt rehearsed, polished. When Lucas asked for a meeting, Michael agreed immediately. They met in a quiet cafe not far from Michael's office. Lucas did not waste time with pleasantries. He placed the printed toxicology report on the table and pushed it toward him. "She didn't imagine any of it," Lucas said evenly. "She was being drugged." Michael stared at the pages, his brow furrowing as he read. At first, confusion, then disbelief, and finally horror. "No," he said softly. "That's not possible." "She's been symptom-free since leaving your house," Lucas replied. "Every single time. The pattern is too consistent to ignore." Michael's hands trembled as he set the papers down. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he did something Lucas hadn't expected. He went very still. That night, after Vanessa and the twins had gone to bed, Michael went to his study and accessed the home's security system. The cameras hadn't been installed for Amelia. They had been added months earlier, quietly, after suspicions about household staff. Michael had never mentioned them to anyone, not even Vanessa. He reviewed the footage methodically. At first, there was nothing. Routine. Normalcy. Then he rewound. There it was. Vanessa in the kitchen, late afternoon. Amelia was upstairs. The staff had already prepared dinner. Vanessa glanced around, moved with practiced confidence, and reached into her purse. A small container. A quick, precise motion over a glass. She stirred, wiped the rim, and left the room. Michael's breath left him in a broken sound. He watched the footage again, and again. There was no mistaking it. The confrontation happened the next morning. Vanessa was calm when Michael asked her to sit down. She was less calm when he placed the toxicology report on the table, and she completely unraveled when he played the footage. For a moment, she tried to deny it. Then she laughed, a short, brittle sound. "You finally figured it out," she said, her composure cracking. "I was wondering how long it would take." Michael stared at her as if she were a stranger. "Why?" he demanded. "Why would you do this to my daughter?" Vanessa's expression hardened. Because she was always in the way. The words came fast after that. Years of resentment spilled out. Jealousy over the attention Amelia received. Rage over the promised apartment. Fear that Amelia would inherit what Vanessa believed should belong to her sons. Control had turned into obsession. Obsession into action. "I didn't want her dead," Vanessa said coldly. "I wanted her out of our lives." Declared unstable, dependent, harmless. Michael stood up. "Get out." The divorce was swift. Vanessa fought, but the evidence left little room for maneuvering. Michael did not press criminal charges, at least not immediately, but he ensured that full custody of Ethan and Oliver remained with him. Vanessa left the house with nothing but her personal belongings and a reputation she could not escape. Amelia returned home only after Vanessa was gone. She walked through the familiar rooms cautiously, as if expecting the walls themselves to whisper. They didn't. The house felt neutral now, empty, safe. Michael met her at the door. He didn't speak at first. He simply pulled her into his arms and held her tightly, as if afraid she might disappear again. "I'm so sorry," he said into her hair. "I should have protected you." Amelia closed her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she believed him. Her name was cleared, her medical records corrected, the false narrative dismantled piece by piece, and the future, once nearly stolen from her, stood open again, not untouched, but hers. Amelia returned home quietly. There was no dramatic reunion, no celebration waiting behind the door. The house felt different now, emptier, calmer. Stripped of attention she had lived with for so long that she had stopped noticing it. The air felt lighter, the rooms no longer pressed in on her. She noticed it immediately. No whispers followed her down the hallway. No shadows lingered at the edges of her vision. Her body moved easily without resistance, without that constant sense of fighting itself. Each ordinary moment, pouring a glass of water, climbing the stairs, opening a window, felt like proof of something fundamental. She was whole. The weeks that followed confirmed it. Amelia's recovery was steady and complete. Her strength returned. Her concentration sharpened. Sleep came easily and left her rested. Follow-up evaluations, conducted openly and transparently this time, documented exactly what the toxicology report had already proven. There was no psychiatric disorder, no underlying illness, only damage inflicted from the outside and now healed. With her name formally cleared and medical records corrected, Amelia resumed her preparations for medical school. Acceptance letters were revisited, enrollment steps completed. The future she had nearly lost unfolded again, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. She studied anatomy in the evenings, not with desperation this time, but with quiet determination. She knew now, more deeply than any textbook could teach, that medicine was not just about diagnosing what appeared on the surface. It was about listening, about patterns, about what didn't fit the easy explanation. Michael watched all of this with a mixture of pride and pain. The house was quieter without Vanessa. The twins adapted more easily than he had feared, their routines stabilizing under consistent care. Michael focused on them when he could, but there were moments, often late at night, when the weight of what he had failed to see settled heavily on his chest. He did not excuse himself. Instead, he apologized more than once, and without defensiveness. "I should have trusted you," he told Amelia one evening, standing awkwardly in the doorway of her room. "I trusted calm explanations over your reality. I won't make that mistake again." Amelia believed him, not because the words were perfect, but because they came with change. Their relationship did not reset overnight. Trust rebuilt slowly, carefully, like something fragile that had to be handled with intention. But there was honesty between them now, and accountability. That mattered. Through it all, Lucas remained quietly present. He never inserted himself into family conversations or demanded explanations. He didn't frame himself as a hero or ask for credit. He showed up when needed, left space when appropriate, and stayed steady through the uncomfortable silences that healing sometimes required. Amelia noticed that, too. She noticed the way she felt calmer when he was nearby, the way conversations with him felt effortless again, no longer shadowed by fear or confusion, the way his presence no longer symbolized survival alone, but something gentler, something that hinted at possibility. One evening, as they walked along the river near her home, Amelia found herself watching the water move past them, steady and unhurried. "I don't think I understood what clarity felt like before," she said. Lucas nodded. "You had it taken from you." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and realized something had shifted. What she felt was no longer just gratitude or relief. It was warmth, trust, the early shape of something she was not yet ready to name, but no longer afraid of acknowledging. She didn't need to rush it. Some things grew best when allowed to unfold naturally. As summer edged closer to its end, Amelia stood in her room one morning, sunlight warming the floor, and thought about everything that had happened, about how close she had come to losing herself, not to illness, but to manipulation disguised as care, about how easily concern could become control when left unquestioned. She understood now that not all harm announced itself as cruelty. Sometimes it arrived gently, with soft voices, with reassurances, with explanations that sounded reasonable enough to accept, especially when repeated by someone close. The most dangerous doubt, she realized, was the kind planted slowly until a person began to mistrust their own clarity. Survival, in her case, had required walking away before she had proof, trusting the pattern instead of the appearance, believing her own experience even when others questioned it. That lesson would stay with her far longer than the fear ever had, and it was one she would carry into her future, not just as a student of medicine, but as a person who understood the cost of ignoring one's own truth. Because not all illnesses come from within. Some harm wears the face of family, and sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is step away from the place that insists they are broken, long before the evidence is ready to speak for them.